In 1962, the average British housewife got her first chest freezer. Within a decade, she had turned it into a weapon, not just for storing fish fingers and bags of peas. She was batch cooking entire Sunday roasts, freezing gravy in ice cube trays, and keeping bread fresh for weeks using methods food scientists are only now proving were chemically brilliant. Number 14 on this list uses a principle that modern flash freezing factories spend millions to replicate. And number 3 creates a texture that no shop-bought product has ever matched. Before we start, hit subscribe, because what your grandmother did with a chest freezer and a roll of cling film might just be the smartest thing that ever happened in a British kitchen. Let us count down the 25 freezer tricks your grandmother knew that science now says were pure genius. Number 25. Freezing milk in glass bottles. Before plastic containers took over, your grandmother froze full pints of milk in glass bottles with the foil cap loosened to allow expansion. She would buy extra pints from the milkman on Friday, knowing the float would not come until Monday, and freeze them standing upright in the chest freezer. The milk expanded by about 9% as it froze, pushing the cream cap up like a frozen mushroom. Children used to snap that frozen cream plug off and eat it like ice cream on a Saturday morning. A pint cost about 4 pence in 1965. Wasting even one was unthinkable. When defrosted slowly in the fridge overnight, the milk tasted exactly as fresh as the day it arrived on the doorstep. The glass bottle kept it tasting clean because glass is non-porous and does not transfer flavor. Modern food scientists now confirm that glass is superior to plastic for freezing dairy because it prevents oxidation and flavor migration. Your grandmother did not know the chemistry. She just knew it tasted right. Number 24. Herb ice cubes. Your grandmother picked parsley, mint, chives, and thyme from the garden in summer, chopped them fine, packed them into ice cube trays, and topped each compartment with a splash of water. Those little green cubes went straight into the freezer and lasted through winter. When she needed herbs for lamb stew or mint sauce, she dropped a cube into the pot. No waste. No wilting bunches rotting in the fridge. A packet of fresh herbs from the greengrocer cost about 6 pence and lasted maybe 4 days. Her frozen cubes lasted 6 months. Food scientists at the University of Reading have since confirmed that flash freezing herbs at the point of peak freshness locks in volatile oils better than refrigeration. The cell walls rupture slightly during freezing, which actually releases more flavor when heated. Your grandmother's ice cube trays were doing what industrial herb processing now does with liquid nitrogen. Number 23. Bread sliced before freezing. Your grandmother never froze a whole loaf. She sliced it first, then wrapped the slices in greaseproof paper before bagging them. That way she could pull out 2 slices at a time for toast without defrosting the entire loaf. A large hovis cost about 1 shilling in 1960, and a family could go through 4 loaves a week. Freezing sliced bread meant she could buy in bulk from the baker on Saturday and have fresh toast all week. The greaseproof paper between slices prevented them from fusing into a solid block. Modern food packaging engineers call this interleaving, and it is standard practice in commercial frozen bread production. But your grandmother was doing it in 1958 with a bread knife and a roll of paper that cost 2p. Number 22. Leftover gravy in ice cube trays. After Sunday dinner, your grandmother poured the leftover gravy through a sieve into ice cube trays and froze it. Each cube was a perfect single portion of concentrated homemade stock. When she needed to make a quick midweek casserole or rescue a dry piece of reheated meat, she dropped 2 or 3 cubes into the pan. They melted into instant richness. Making gravy from scratch takes at least 20 minutes. A frozen cube took 30 seconds. An OXO cube cost a penny, but her frozen gravy cubes contained real meat juices, real onion, real dripping. Food scientists now classify this as concentrated fond, the caramelized meat residue that professional chefs spend hours developing. Your grandmother had it ready in her freezer, portioned and waiting. We buy Bisto granules now for £2.50 a tub, never realizing that the best gravy in Britain was already frozen in a plastic tray in your nan's kitchen. Number 21. Blanching vegetables before freezing. Your grandmother never put raw vegetables straight into the freezer. She blanched them first. Runner beans got 2 minutes in boiling water. Carrots got 3. Peas got 1. Then straight into ice-cold water to stop the cooking, drained on a tea towel, and into freezer bags. This was not guesswork. This was precision learned from the Women's Institute and passed around in handwritten notes at village hall meetings. Blanching deactivates enzymes called lipoxygenase and peroxidase that cause frozen vegetables to turn brown, mushy, and bitter over time. Without blanching, frozen beans lose their color in 3 weeks. With blanching, they last 12 months. The timing mattered. Too long and the vegetables turned to mush. Too short and the enzymes survived. Your grandmother knew those times by heart. She did not need a food science degree. She needed a kitchen timer and a colander. Number 20. Open freezing berries on trays. When the blackberries came in from the hedgerows or the strawberries ripened in the garden, your grandmother spread them out on baking trays in a single layer and froze them uncovered for 2 hours. Only then did she tip them into bags. This prevented them from freezing into a solid clump. Each berry stayed separate, so she could pour out a handful for a crumble without defrosting the whole bag. Modern food manufacturers call this IQF, individually quick frozen, and they use conveyor belt freezers that cost hundreds of thousands of pounds to achieve the same result. Your grandmother did it with a baking tray and a bit of patience. The rapid surface freeze also preserved cell structure better than slow freezing in a bag, which is why her crumbles tasted like fresh fruit and the shop-bought frozen berries from Iceland turned to purple soup. First pattern break. Here is where the freezer gets clever. Your grandmother discovered something about butter that took the dairy industry decades to admit. She bought butter in bulk when it was on offer, sometimes a whole pound for 1 and 6, and froze it in its original wrapper with an extra layer of foil. Butter freezes beautifully for up to 12 months without losing flavor, texture, or baking performance. The high fat content means ice crystals cannot form the way they do in water-based foods. When she needed butter for a Victoria sponge, she would grate it frozen directly into the flour using a box grater. The frozen shreds distributed through the mixture faster than softened butter and created a lighter, flakier texture because the cold fat melted slowly during baking, creating steam pockets. Professional pastry chefs now teach this as the grated frozen butter method for scones and pastry. Delia Smith featured it decades after British grandmothers had been doing it without a cookbook in sight. Number 18. Freezing eggs without shells. You could not freeze eggs in their shells because they would crack and leak everywhere. Your grandmother knew this, so she cracked them into ice cube trays, 1 egg per compartment, and froze them. For baking, she would beat them lightly first with a pinch of salt or sugar, depending on whether they were destined for cakes or quiches. A dozen eggs cost about 2 shillings in 1958. When the hens were laying well in summer, she could have 30 eggs a week, and no way to use them all before they turned. Freezing solved the problem completely. Those frozen egg cubes lasted 6 months and performed almost identically to fresh eggs in cakes, Yorkshire puddings, and custards. Modern egg processing plants now use the exact same principle, freezing liquid egg in bulk for commercial bakeries. Your grandmother was running a miniature egg processing facility from her kitchen counter. Number 17. Freezing mashed potato in portions. Leftover mashed potato went into a freezer bag in individual dollops, each one about the size of a tennis ball. Your grandmother would pipe or spoon them onto a lined baking tray, open freeze them, then bag them up. When she needed a quick fish pie topping or a side for Wednesday sausages, she pulled out 3 or 4 frozen mounds and either defrosted them in the pan with a splash of milk or placed them frozen directly on top of the pie filling before baking. The starch in potatoes can turn gummy when frozen badly, but your grandmother avoided this by mashing with plenty of butter and milk first. The fat coated the starch granules and prevented them from breaking down during freezing. Food scientists call this starch retrogradation prevention. She called it making sure there was enough butter. A 5-pound bag of King Edward's cost about 1 and 6. Nothing went to waste. Number 16. Grated cheese in freezer bags. Your grandmother bought a whole block of cheddar, maybe a red Leicester if she was feeling fancy, and grated the lot in one go. The grated cheese went into freezer bags with the air squeezed out and straight into the chest freezer. Frozen grated cheese does not clump because the small surface area means it freezes and thaws almost instantly. She could reach into the bag and sprinkle it directly onto cauliflower cheese or shepherd's pie without waiting for it to defrost. A block of Cathedral City cost about 2 shillings in the 1960s, and grating it fresh every time was a chore nobody wanted. This single trick saved time every single evening of the week. Commercial food manufacturers now sell pre-grated frozen cheese for 3 times the price of a block, coated in anti-caking agents your grandmother never needed because she simply grated it herself. Second pattern break. Controversy incoming. Now here is a freezer trick that got your grandmother in trouble with the health visitors, but science has since vindicated her completely. She made enormous batches of stew, curry and casserole, then portioned them into old margarine tubs, ice cream containers, and even washed out tin cans with foil lids. Those containers went into the freezer stacked like bricks, each one labeled with a strip of masking tape and a biro. Health and safety campaigners in the 1980s warned against reusing food containers for freezing, claiming bacteria could survive in scratched plastic. But recent research from the Food Standards Agency found that properly cleaned containers pose no greater risk than purpose-built freezer boxes. The real genius was the portioning. Each tub held exactly enough for 2 adults and 2 children. No waste, no measuring, no thinking. Tuesday tea was sorted in the time it took to reheat a margarine tub of Lancashire hot pot. We spend £12 on meal prep containers from Amazon now. She used a washed flora tub and a bit of common sense. Number 14. Freezing pastry in discs. Your grandmother made short crust pastry in bulk. A pound of flour, half a pound of fat, a pinch of salt, and enough cold water to bind. She would divide the dough into 4 portions, flatten each one into a disc about an inch thick, wrap them individually in grease-proof paper, and freeze. When she needed a pie crust, she pulled out 1 disc and let it thaw for 30 minutes on the counter. The flat disc shape was crucial. It thawed evenly and quickly because of the high surface area to volume ratio. A ball of dough would still be frozen solid in the center, while the outside turned sticky. Professional bakers now recommend this exact method. The reason it works so well is that pastry dough contains very little water. The fat prevents large ice crystals from forming, so the texture after thawing is virtually identical to fresh. Your grandmother could have a homemade pie on the table in 40 minutes, start to finish, using frozen pastry she made on a rainy Sunday 3 months earlier. Number 13. Freezing cake layers unfrosted. When your grandmother baked a birthday Victoria sponge, she often made the layers days or even weeks in advance. She would bake 2 sponge rounds, let them cool completely on a wire rack, then wrap each one tightly in cling film and foil before freezing. On the morning of the birthday, she pulled them out, let them thaw for 2 hours at room temperature, then filled and iced them fresh. The result was a cake that tasted like it had been baked that morning. Here is the science that makes this work. Freezing slows staling by preventing starch retrogradation, the process that makes bread and cake go dry and crumbly. A frozen sponge actually tastes fresher after thawing than a sponge that sat on the counter for 2 days. Professional bakeries have used this technique for decades. Your grandmother knew it in 1962, armed with nothing but a chest freezer and a roll of baker foil. Number 12. Lemon and orange zest frozen in bags. Whenever your grandmother used a lemon or orange, she zested the entire fruit first, even if the recipe only called for juice. That precious zest went into a small freezer bag, pressed flat and frozen. Over weeks and months, she accumulated a bag of mixed citrus zest that she could break off in pieces whenever a recipe needed brightness. Lemon drizzle cake, orange marmalade, pancake batter on Shrove Tuesday. A lemon cost about 3 pence in 1960. Throwing away the zest was like throwing away half the flavor. Food chemists have since confirmed that citrus zest contains concentrated essential oils, primarily limonene, that survive freezing almost perfectly because they are oil-soluble rather than water-soluble. Ice crystals cannot damage what they cannot penetrate. Your grandmother preserved the most flavorful part of the fruit without even knowing the chemistry. Number 11. Freezing sandwiches for packed lunches. Every Sunday evening, your grandmother made a week's worth of sandwiches for the children's packed lunches. Cheese and pickle, ham and mustard. Egg mayonnaise was avoided because it did not freeze well. She wrapped each sandwich in grease-proof paper, stacked them in a bread bag, and froze the lot. Every morning she pulled out the right number of sandwiches and put them straight into lunchboxes. By midday, they had thawed perfectly, cool and fresh. A working mother with 3 children saved at least 20 minutes every morning. That was 20 minutes for getting school uniforms sorted instead of buttering bread at 7:30. The bread acted as insulation for the filling, and the fillings that worked, cheese, ham, corned beef, kept their texture because their fat and protein content resisted ice crystal damage. This trick appeared in women's magazines throughout the 1960s and was quietly abandoned when supermarkets started selling pre-packed sandwiches for prices your grandmother would have considered criminal. Number 10. Freezing fresh breadcrumbs. Stale bread never went in the bin. Your grandmother tore it into chunks, whizzed it in the moulinex if she had one, or grated it by hand if she did not, and froze the crumbs in a bag. Those breadcrumbs went straight from the freezer onto fish before frying, into stuffing for the Christmas turkey, or on top of macaroni cheese for a golden crust. A bag of shop-bought breadcrumbs cost 6pence and contained preservatives and additives. Her frozen breadcrumbs were pure bread, nothing else, and they lasted months. The dry, starchy composition of breadcrumbs means they freeze without clumping and can be used directly from frozen because they thaw almost instantly when they hit hot fat or a warm oven. Every modern professional kitchen keeps a container of frozen breadcrumbs. Your grandmother was running a professional kitchen without knowing it. Third pattern break. Before we continue, here is a freezer trick so simple it borders on embarrassing that nobody does anymore. Your grandmother kept a freezer log. A notebook, sometimes just a sheet of paper taped to the freezer lid, listing every item inside with the date it went in. Lamb stew, the 14th of March. Blackberries, the 22nd of August. Pastry discs, the 3rd of November. This meant she never forgot what was buried at the bottom. Nothing got freezer burned because nothing stayed in there longer than it should. She rotated stock like a shop manager, using the oldest items first. Modern households throw away an estimated 6.6 million tons of food waste per year in the UK. Your grandmother threw away almost nothing because she knew exactly what she had and when it needed using. That notebook cost nothing. The savings were enormous. We buy apps for meal planning now that do less than her biro and a scrap of paper. Number 8. Freezing double cream after whipping. Fresh double cream cost about 2 shillings for a small carton in 1960 and went off within days. Your grandmother's trick was to whip the cream until it held soft peaks, then pipe or dollop rosettes onto a lined baking tray and open freeze them. Once solid, she transferred the frozen cream rosettes into a bag. When she served tinned fruit salad or jelly at a tea party, she placed a frozen rosette on each bowl. It thawed in exactly the time it took to eat the pudding. Perfect timing. No rushing to whip cream at the last minute. No cream going sour in the fridge. Food scientists confirm that whipped cream freezes well because the incorporated air acts as insulation and the high fat content prevents damaging ice crystal formation. The structure holds because the fat globules are already stabilized by whipping. Your grandmother had an endless supply of elegant cream decorations ready for any occasion, stored in a freezer bag that cost nothing. Number 7. Freezing cooked rice in portions. Your grandmother cooked a large pot of rice, let it cool quickly by spreading it on a baking tray, then portioned it into freezer bags, pressing each one flat. Flat bags stacked neatly and thawed in minutes. When she needed rice for a quick curry or fried rice, she dropped the frozen block into a hot pan with a splash of water, and it was ready in 3 minutes. This mattered because cooking rice properly takes 20 minutes and attention. Reheating frozen rice took 3 minutes and no supervision. The rapid cooling was important. Rice contains Bacillus cereus spores that can multiply at room temperature. By cooling and freezing quickly, your grandmother was preventing bacterial growth without knowing the microbiology. She just knew that rice left sitting out went funny. Modern food safety guidance now recommends exactly this method. Cool rice within 1 hour and freeze immediately. Your grandmother's instinct was the same as the Food Standards Agency's official advice published 40 years later. Number 6. Freezing stock in yogurt pots. After boiling a chicken carcass for hours with onion, carrot and celery, your grandmother strained the golden stock and poured it into clean yogurt pots or cottage cheese containers. Each pot held about half a pint, enough for a soup or a risotto. The stock set into a jelly because of the natural gelatin from the bones. That wobbling, concentrated jelly was liquid gold. A tin of chicken stock cost about 9 pence and tasted of salt and chemicals. Her frozen stock tasted of actual chicken. When thawed, it melted back into a rich, clear broth that elevated everything it touched. Modern chefs pay premium prices for bone broth, marketing it as a health superfood. Your grandmother made gallons of it every time she roasted a chicken and froze the surplus in containers she got for free. The gelatin, collagen and minerals that make bone broth so trendy today were sitting in her freezer in 1964. Number 5. Freezing banana for baking. When bananas turned brown and spotty on the fruit bowl, your grandmother peeled them and froze them whole in a bag. Those frozen bananas went straight into banana bread, banana cake, or banana custard. The freezing process broke down the cell walls, making the bananas even sweeter and softer when thawed. She never had to throw a banana away. Bananas cost about 3 pence each in the 1960s, and with 3 children going through a bunch a week, the ones that got too ripe for eating still had value. Modern bakers now specifically recommend using frozen overripe bananas for the best banana bread, because the freeze-thaw cycle concentrates sugars and creates a smoother texture when mashed. Every food blogger on the internet presents this as a discovery. Your grandmother was doing it before the internet existed. Number 4. Freezing batches of soup. Your grandmother made soup in quantities that would feed an army. A whole pan of leek and potato, a vat of Scotch broth. Enough tomato soup to last a fortnight. She ladled it into containers, left a gap at the top for expansion, sealed them, and stacked them in the freezer like library books. A bowl of homemade soup for Tuesday lunch cost her about 2p in ingredients and 3 minutes to reheat. A tin of Heinz cost 9 pence and contained enough salt to preserve a pharaoh. Her soups were fresher, cheaper, and better for you. The key insight was that soups with high water content freeze exceptionally well because the even distribution of ingredients means consistent ice crystal formation throughout, with no structural damage to the final product. Cream-based soups were the exception. She knew those went grainy. So she froze the base without cream and stirred it in after reheating. That instinct matches exactly what food science textbooks now recommend. 4th pattern break. The secret weapon hiding in every grandmother's freezer was not a food at all. It was frozen newspaper. She wrapped fish, meat, and anything with a strong smell in several layers of newspaper before putting it in the freezer. The newspaper acted as insulation and an odor barrier, preventing the smell of kippers from contaminating the ice cream. A free copy of the Daily Mirror did what expensive freezer bags with odor lock technology now charge £3 for. The cellulose fibers in newspaper are natural absorbers, trapping volatile odor molecules before they can migrate to other foods. Modern freezer scientists acknowledge that wrapping in an absorbent outer layer reduces flavor transfer between frozen items. Your grandmother solved the problem with yesterday's news and a bit of string. Number 2. Freezing leftover wine in ice cube trays. If there was ever wine left in the bottle after dinner, and in your grandmother's house that was rare, she poured it into ice cube trays and froze it. Those wine cubes went into beef bourguignon, coq au vin, and spaghetti bolognese. A splash of red wine transforms a cheap casserole into something restaurant-worthy, And having frozen cubes meant she never had to open a whole bottle just for cooking. A bottle of wine cost about 7 shillings in the 1960s. Every drop had value. The alcohol content lowers the freezing point slightly, so wine cubes stay slightly softer than water ice, making them easy to pop out of the tray. The flavor compounds, the tannins and anthocyanins that give red wine its depth, survive freezing perfectly. Professional chefs keep frozen wine in their kitchens for exactly this purpose. Your grandmother was not being thrifty, she was being a professional. Number 1. The labeled freezer meal system. This was not a single trick, it was an entire philosophy. Your grandmother cooked double portions of everything. Every shepherd's pie, every chicken casserole, every fish pie. One went on the table, one went in the freezer, labeled with masking tape, dated with a biro, and filed according to her own system. Some women organized by protein, beef on the left, chicken in the middle, fish on the right. Others went by day. Monday meals at the front, emergency teas at the back. The result was a rotating library of home-cooked meals that meant no family member ever went hungry. No evening was wasted cooking from scratch when life got complicated, and no money was spent on takeaways or ready meals when the unexpected happened. A funeral, a sick child, a husband working late. There was always something in the freezer. This system, which modern meal prep influencers now sell courses on and build entire social media empires around, was standard practice in British kitchens from the 1960s onwards. Your grandmother did not need an app, a subscription service, or a set of matching glass containers. She needed a chest freezer, a roll of masking tape, and the knowledge that feeding a family well was the most important job in the house. Here is my challenge. Try one of these this week. Just one. The herb ice cubes, the gravy portions, the frozen pastry discs, the breadcrumb bag. Then come back and tell me your grandmother was wrong. Tell me the supermarket version is better. Tell me your ready meal tastes like a shepherd's pie pulled from the chest freezer and reheated in the oven until the potato top went golden and crispy. Because I tried the frozen cream rosettes last Sunday and my daughter asked why they tasted better than the squirty can. I made the gravy cubes and my bolognese tasted like it had been simmering for hours. Share which one you're going to try in the comments. These were not just freezer tricks. They were a system for feeding families with love, intelligence, and absolutely zero waste. Your grandmother knew. Now you know too.